Welcome to Step 2025. This is day 2 and you're at the Podstep pop-up studio, and joining us today we've got Jacopo from FTI Capital Advisors, who is going to cover a very interesting topic with us today. Jacopo, welcome, and please introduce yourself and what your role is and what brings you to Step as well.
Thank you very much, Lara. I'm Jacopo Pichelli. As you mentioned, I work for FTI Capital Advisors, which is the M&A team of the FTI Consulting, which is a large consulting company based out of the US with presence globally and particularly here in the Middle East. I do cover M&A, and within that, and I would say with relations to the topic of this event, which is mostly startups, what is relevant is that we do help startups being sold or raising funds from investors or buyers. But at the same time, we also help larger companies which are looking for startups or something like that, and we help them conducting the acquisition. And by doing that, we interact with a lot of startups, although we are on the other side, so we are, if you want, their counterparty.
Just for the sake of clarification, what is M&A?
M&A is mergers and acquisitions. Typically, to have a merger, you have two companies to be roughly the same size. Otherwise, when it's one larger company that acquires a smaller company, that is called acquisition.
Why do startups want to be acquired?
So, startups, they start as a small company, typically fully owned by founders. It's very rare that you have startups that are already fully funded by
Absolutely,
investors.
yes.
There are cases,
yeah,
but it's not, I would say, the common case. As the startup grows over time, they might or might not need some capital. They look for potential investors and whoever provide them capital, but this is not what we call acquisition. Sooner or later, when the business it is at a more mature stage, or the startup possesses something unique which is in high demand by some other companies in the market, then they might receive offers for being acquired. When we say acquired, it means that the company control will be taken over by other shareholders. So the founder, who initially owns majority or if not all of the startup, it will become a minority in a shareholding point of view, which also means that it has to do not everything, but it has to comply, I would say, with the requirement of the new owner. And this is as in any other business. There are, I would say, two interesting cases that we can talk about. One is the case when the founder stays as a minority shareholder and most likely also within the management of the company. And the other case is when the founder sells completely the company, but still is required to stay as part of the management. Obviously, there is also a case where the founder exits completely the shareholding of the company, takes his well-deserved money and goes on a retirement, but there's not much to discuss on that sense, I would say.
So in our region, typically, what is the most typical scenario for startups that made it through? Let's say they've produced a product or a solution that is really prominent, driving innovation in this space, and they become a growing company that is in demand either by the investors or by companies, bigger corporations that would like to drive an innovation within their brand. So what is the more typical scenario for our region? Is it an acquisition or is it more of a fundraise? What do startups want in most of the cases?
So there are two different questions, actually. What do startups want in most of the cases? Well, that's a fundraiser.
A fundraiser. So
typically,
they want to stay in control.
Yeah, they want to stay in control and they want to have enough capital to help them grow. So developing new products, hiring new salespeople or entering new geographies, everything that is helped to grow the business costs money, right? And typically it takes some time before it gives enough return. So if you do the organic growth, what the startups they call bootstrap, it takes longer. because you do generate a little bit of money that is reinvested, and then you will generate a little bit more money and so on. But by taking longer, you might be, I would say, overtaken by other companies that are taking the shortcut, let's say. And the shortcut is obtaining capital from the market. When you obtain capital from the market, that helps you to, let's say, be faster, and also have a partner that you can count on also for the future, for whenever you need even more money, right? That maybe you don't need it now and you're not capable of raising now. By doing that, the owner that starts from owning 100% and he gets diluted. That's the technical name. So after the first round, he will own, 80%, and then after another round, he will own 60%, and so on and so forth. That's the preferred case for startups, I would say. And I would say for the UAE tech scene, that's also the most common case. Why is more common? First, it's more common because there is more venture capital funds than private equity funds, and venture capital funds are the funds that actually do this type of investments. And second is because these investments are smaller in size, so they can be more numerous. And so if you count, let's say, the announcement, the news, or what your friends tell, you have more of something which is sort of requires less money and less of what requires a lot of money, right? So long story short, what is more common here is startups looking for funding, and that actually happens. However, when is acquisition something that comes into play? As we were saying before, perhaps the company is mature enough, and the founders believe that they want to do something else. Something else might be, for example, starting another startup.
True.
So when you do that, you do an exit for whatever your startups you have. You will be paid for that. So you will have some capital at the moment you exit, and then you can use this capital to start another startups. And in the second, let's say, round, of course, first of all, you are more expert. Second, you have more capital already because of this first exit, or you are less reliant on having to find investors. Now you are more self-sufficient, and also you have a reputation. So in case you go and look for funding, the venture capital funds, they look at you and they know that you are the guys that have already successfully founded X, Y, and Z companies and successfully exited, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, the world is a much easier place after you create and exit your first startup. In other cases, the acquisition is not driven by the will of the founder, but is driven by actually some requests that they come from the market. They are unprompted requests, but in many cases, these unprompted requests are very interesting. At least to say financially, right?
Yeah.
So then founders start considering that, and they start considering, from their point of view, it's not an acquisition, but it's a divestiture, right?
Yeah.
Because they are selling. So they're considering a sale of the company. And I would say this is a case that personally I've worked mostly with. So by advising large buyers that are established companies from this region and this country, we have approached some companies that we have scouted, is that technical name. Also, we scouted ourselves, and we thought, okay, this is a company that looks promising. This is a company that does exactly what you're looking for. If you agree, let's approach them and see. And then what happens is that we do approach these companies, and in some cases, the founders, they dismiss immediately, I would say. They say, no, I don't want to sell. I'm happy where I am, so thank you. I'm glad for the interest, but that's not what I'm going to do. In other cases, founders who have not been exploring this diversion until that moment, they start exploring it.
Thinking.
They start thinking. And then there's another two possible outcomes here. Some, they say, okay, this offer is very interesting. Let me discuss with you, with whatever is the buyer, and see if we get anywhere. And the other approach is, so this means there is interest for a company like mine from the market. So let me run what we call a competitive process, which essentially means you kind of package, I would say,
the
business in a nice brochure, I'd say that we call investors memorandum, and then you try to contact many potential buyers to see if there are others that also want to acquire you, or maybe they make a better offer. So this is more or less the way it works. So whenever you have this type of acquisition, I believe there are two important aspects to consider. One is what everyone has on top of their mind, which is the financial aspects. So how much is this company being acquired for? But that's not the only financial aspect. That depends on first of all what the founder wants to do after this acquisition. He wants to stay or he wants to leave, right? But especially if you want to stay, it's very important to figure out what benefits is the buyer going to bring to your company, especially if you keep a minority stake, which is often the case. By picking the right buyer, you will be able to unlock so much more benefit that potentially this minority stake in the future will be worth much more than what you are actually selling today.
Interesting. So I think a very, very interesting point that you touched upon is the role that you are actually acting in the acquisitions like that. If you're pointing out or you're identifying the company that has got a high potential, and you also know the big corporation that is interested in a specific setup and a specific solution. So you basically what you're doing, you're finding the right fit. And with this regard, a question to you. So why, for example, startups and companies can be attractive for the big buyers? So what are those attributes to become attractive for the buyers? And on the other side, so why do startups, even though they don't think about it, need to consider an acquisition? And is every corporation is for them, or you need to find the right fit? Two sides of the same question, right?
Yeah, so let's start with why a startup might be of interest of these large corporations, right? In order to answer that, and that's the job actually we do, right? So you need to understand first what is the strategy of the large corporation, because these large corporations are not necessarily global. They might be also just present in one or few countries, right? So we typically look at what they want to, what is their strategy with regards to, first, geographical expansion. Why? Because you might have a company that does a certain product, makes a certain product or supplies a certain service in a country, and they want to acquire a company which does exactly the same but in another country, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one way. So it's geographical expansion. The other way is if you want the vice versa. Yeah. So not looking at some company that does exactly the same job as this large corporation in another country, but rather within the same geography, so within the same footprint, looking for startups which are offering services or making products which are complementary. For example, I don't know, I make phones. You sells the monthly connectivity plan, and one or the other might want to buy the other, right? And say, okay, we bundle and we give this thing out. This is an example that is a bit stupid, but just to give an idea. This happens a lot. I would say you can see, for example, Coca-Cola entering the water, so moving out from sort of the soft drinks into the water world, and also into food verticals. So this is something that happens quite a lot. Usually there's a technical term for that, which is called adjacencies. Yeah. So that could be large corporation which want to enter a completely and this area of business which is not really linked to what they do today. But that's not really the case often, right? Usually, the word adjacencies is used to indicate a market or a vertical that is not too different, I'd say, from the one where the company currently is, and for which the company believes they can also reuse some of their workforce, some of their production plans, let's say, some of their logistics. They have something, they say, that can be put to work already, not something completely separate. So we have seen the first is geographical expansion, the second is complementarity of products and services, and the third one, I would say, it's more, we can categorize generally as knowledge or know-how.
Yeah.
But it goes a little bit beyond that. And I give you an example. Imagine you are a larger retailer, right, of base, for example, in the UAE. And you do already have your traditional sales channels. You do have a shop in the main malls, and you do have a number of brands and whatever. But maybe there's a company that is emerging and is being successful because they are applying, say, sort of a AI technology or virtual reality technology in order to help you choose whatever clothes or whatever item you want to buy, right? Because perhaps they help you with the phone to visualize, I don't know, a piece of decoration in your home rather than suggesting which color of a scarf goes well with your hair. No, this type of things. Then this retailer might be interested in acquiring this company.
Yeah.
Not because they have different sort of products, because ultimately they sell similar products.
True.
Not because of the customer base, which is most likely very limited compared to the customer base that the retailer already has, but just because they wanted this know-how of how this system works and put it to use within their existing retail operations. And hopefully, I mean, that's the objective of this transaction, is to help them sell more.
Absolutely. So there's obviously, there has to be a good match, right, between the startup or the smaller company and the bigger corporation. Does it always have to be also a match in terms of the culture, leadership, values?
Definitely. So I work in finance. That's broadly our sector, right? And when you think of that, and you think of investment bankers, you think of people that they come and they look at all numbers and they do a lot of calculations, right? And then I don't know what. But the reality is that way before getting to this point, a deal to be born and to exist, it needs strategic fit and cultural fit.
Sure.
Strategic fit is what we have discussed until now.
Right.
And cultural fit means that whether the management stays or no, overall, the startup organization needs to be able to work with the large corporation that is acquiring it. There are different approaches to that. Some large organizations, they are more possessive, if you want, and they essentially make the startup becoming a department of a team of the large organizations. There are other approaches where large organizations, they tend to give more freedom, let's say, so they keep the startup as a separate entity with their own branding, their own team, their own culture, etc. But in both cases, the cultural fit is very important. One of the things that we always do at the beginning is, I was telling you, for example, we suggest companies that have a certain characteristic and see if we want to approach them. Well, once we have approached them and we have, first of all, figured out that what we had in mind corresponds to reality, right? Second, that this company is open to discussions. The next immediate step is putting in touch the two senior management for just some coffee or friendly chat, because there's needed to be a feeling. Ultimately, one is going to be the boss of the other. The other is going to be the main operating person as part of this startup when it is acquired, and it's a long, not a marriage, but it's a long-term, say, working relationship, right? So at the same way as when you hire a senior people within an organization, there is quite of a lot of dating, if you want. So there is a lot of
definitely
because you need to make sure that a senior person is fits well within the organization. Exactly at the same way, the founders are going to become some level of senior people,
Yeah.
right, within the organization, that acquires them. So there is need to be this cultural dating. There are some cultural barriers in a way that are well known. For example, from different parts of the world, how they operate. But because they are well known, usually they are taken into account at an early stage. So in a way, if you're trying to match to culture that are a bit different, it happens only if really is that acquiring the company is the only way to achieve that precise objective. Otherwise, most likely, the large corporation will prefer to acquire another company that is likely to be a better cultural fit, even if it maybe it's smaller, even if maybe it's performing financially less well, right? But that's the weight, I would say, of the cultural fit within an acquisition is so important that can actually move or override other factors within the investment decision.
That's great. There's a lot to consider, right? And there's right acquisitions to happen. And I think you've got a really, really critical role in the region, considering how fast the ecosystem is developing, how strong it becomes, and, probably considering, solutions evolve and the requirement for innovation in different also big niches like oil and gas, logistics, retail, etc. So there's a big room for, I think, acquisitions to happen going forward. So thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. I think it's going to be really, really valuable for all the startup founders who are listening to us.
Thank you very much, Lara, and thank you everyone who has been listening.
Yeah. Posto Pop-Up Studio, and it's Jacopo from FTI Advisors. Capital
Advisors.
Yeah, that's
correct.
True. Yeah.